Oh, hi guys and girls, Emma again, welcome back to the spare room. Don't know where to even start this, and I've sort of put it off a couple of weeks, but I should get in and start it, so you're guinea pigs, because I really don't know whether it's going to work. I'm fairly confident I can make something work out of this, but quite a few YouTubers have attempted to do this and given up, so let's have a look and see. So, Mr. Pete, Triple Cane, Mr. Pete 222, on YouTube. I'm sure you all follow him. Anyone who watches this video is gonna have watched his video, and that's a given. I think if you haven't, you've been under a rock somewhere, and it's probably time to emerge and go and have a look. But he did a video recently and got a bit of flack about it actually. A boy's steam engine in 3 parts. It was quite a good series, and he used all hand tools and a drill press, and he made a little steam engine that ran quite nicely. A little bit noisy in the crank and the bearings, but ran pretty nice, and should be pretty pleased with that. Malcoflincoln, if you don't watch him, you're missing out. In the UK, he got in contact with me and said, why don't we all make one and make up a montage video of them all going and send it to him. So that's pretty cool, but I thought if I'm going to make one, I might as well make a video as well. So I sort of had a bit of a look and thought, probably I've got most things, we'll have a look and see. So if we have a look in the bolt assortment, these are washers and bolts that are mostly non-metric. We're going to need some mudguard washers, or some fender washers as Mr. Pete calls them, for flywheel. Probably the flywheel doesn't want to be much heavier than that. I don't think it wants to be much thicker than that. They're 1/4 inch by probably 1.25 inches, something like that, I reckon. Say they're 1/4 inch, not 6mm, because they've got a fairly big hole in them. Probably too big for that, and it's pretty wobbly. We could pack this out with washers. I don't like that much, because I think that too much weight hanging off the end of a crank when our crank's really only running on this thread is not a particularly good thing mechanically. So probably we need a shorter bolt. Don't know what we've got here. Probably use something like that. Probably 1/4 inch one would be better if we've got one. I think I've only got M6 lock nuts, so we might just, a couple of things we could do, because it's got so much thread on it, I could run that thread down a bit and lock him up. Probably we could find a little piece of tube to fit in there. It's a nice fit. Stop that wobbling and give me a bit more balance there. It's probably a good thing. I'm going to need a lock nut on there to hold all that in place, and then a washer, and the plate it goes through, and another lock nut, and probably a couple of little half nuts if we file one of these down, because we can't use machine tools, otherwise I just put him in the lathe and file him up. And put one each side, I think we'd have a pretty neat little crankshaft. So put all these bits aside. This is an Aldi assortment of lock nuts. It was good value for money, and probably going to be using them for a bit. There's one to hold the flywheel in place. That looks pretty good. What else have we got? What else do we need? Now I've got heaps of brass, and it seems to me that brass for a cylinder is not a good idea, because I could have put a hole fairly neat in it and fairly true and fairly close to the end, and brass is going to grab and spin round, and it's going to be difficult to get it clean, and it's going to leave a five-sided hole. Really not particularly impressed about making it out of brass, but I've got this block of aluminium. If you have a look, it's got a hole in it halfway through, which we might leave or we might not. Probably it's something I was messing around trying to get the shape of the cut in aluminium with. But if we give it a file up and we cut this down here and make it square, spend a bit of time on it with a file, we might just get a cylinder out of that. I reckon that's going to be pretty good. Got a bit of aluminium here for a base plate too. That should give us a fairly neat, reasonably well proportioned little engine, I think. And I reckon we can get that going. So what's the first job? So what's the first job? Probably mark this out, give it a file up, cut all the rough edges off it, mark it out, slice it down in past this hole here with a hacksaw, and file it up nice and square with a square, mark the centre and put a hole in it, and drill a hole in the centre for a pivot. So I think that's the first job. We'll get that out of the way, and the next thing will be to start looking for a piece of timber to screw this on for a stand, and cut it to length and put a hole in it. We should have a pretty reasonable job. We could probably use this hole for a pivot. I think it's a bit big though. Probably doesn't need to be this long. It'd run a bit better if it was longer. And that hole is in the centre. And it's not really. I think I'm going to cut that off and start again. Might be the best. Trying to mess around, use that hole is a bit difficult. So let's give this a file up, and we'll come back and we'll mark him up. So I'm probably going to cheat. I don't know if it's cheating, but I'm going to use the Barzi Industrial Z-Square to mark this out, because it's the best tool for the job. It's a hand tool for sure, but it is the best tool for the job. I'm never going to see the lines. I'm getting old. If I don't coat this nicely with blue. I don't know how many parts this will run to, and to be honest, I just want to get it out and finish. It feels like a quick project, but I'm guessing it's probably not. Mr. Pete feels like he did it in a couple of days, but he probably never either. I'm still going to spend tonight on it and most of tomorrow, and you might get a video by the end of that if I can edit some of this down into manageable portions. And then if it takes another video to get it running, well, I'll do that. Otherwise it'll be going. So it's not going to be an in-depth sort of a look really, but I wanted to sort of have a bit of a look at how I thought I'd approach it. I've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks, and there are comments that I talk too much, mostly by people who've never put a video up in their life, and probably I do talk too much. Let's mark this out and see what we end up with. So we need to scribe a line around there where we want to cut it. Might need some light too. Now this is probably going to be the outside, I think. And we're going to call this the inside. Probably this side that we haven't messed with is probably the best valve face. Either one would clean up nice. So I reckon probably only needs to be that long. And a good sharp hacksaw, we should be able to trim that off nicely pretty quickly, I reckon. I'm not going to show a lot of the hacksawing because it's over there in the vise and the light's sort of ordinary. I did buy a little vise to go on the bench here, but that's probably more ordinary than the light. So I'm just going to slice this down with a hacksaw and give it a clean up, and we'll see how it looks. Don't know if you can see that. Let's trim him up. So I got this little vise out, and we might use that for this job. It's plenty good enough. It's a bit rattly, but it'll tighten up nice. Now this is aluminium, and because I hacksaw cut it, it got pretty hot. So I've cut that piece off one side, which had the hole in it, and cut this piece off the other side, which had that bit of a groove in it. And the next job will be to flatten it off with a file. This was pretty hot, so if you're going to do this, unless you've got a bit of oil on your cutting edge, probably you're going to find that you might burn your fingers, so be careful of that. Very difficult to cut straight, and if you look at that, we're quite a way out. So if we find the lowest corner and mark this all the way around nicely, it doesn't need a whole lot off it to be nice. These jaws are hard, so if we set that down here, I'll just take the burrs off that first. It's raining out there. You might be able to hear that. Now I'm a bit like Mr. Pete, and I don't go back and finish things normally when I got them finished. So I'm going to take a bit of effort to get this right from the start, and hopefully we'll have not only an engine that runs, it's something that looks pretty good too. And taking the time and the care to get it right is probably well worthwhile. This is called draw filing. What we're aiming for is to get all the scratches out of there. That's one side. Other side will follow suit with, but I might just take these sharp corners off here and check it for square before we do anything else. won't be much, but I might just take another cut off there. We'll leave it at that. We must be getting pretty close there. And we're good that way. Probably pretty good that way. Probably a fraction high in the middle there, but good enough. And good that way. So we're going to live with that. We'll just mark the other side the same. Take these corners off again. Like so. Mark the other side and clean that up parallel, sort of, if we possibly can. And have another look when we've done it. So I guess it's taken me probably half hour, a bit longer, to cut this out and file it up. This is reasonably square and true. It's about where it wants to be. It looks pretty good. Next job, I guess, is probably to mark this out with a cross on one end to drill the hole. Probably we're going to put the hole out this distance a bit, or further out this way, to give a bit of clearance in the back for the steam, for the pivot screw. I'm not going to drill this particularly big. I reckon about 8mm would be plenty. I don't think it wants to be much bigger than that. The longer the piston in relation to its diameter, the better the sliding fit, and the less friction you're going to have, and the less binding and tightness. So I'm going to mark this probably, if we put an 8mm hole in there, or a 5/16 hole. I'll see what I can find as far as I should have a 5/16 piece of brass for a piston, I think. And just mark equal distance from the end as it is from the side. So we mark the centre and then mark the same distance off the end. And centre punch it. And set him up in the drill press. And see if we can drill him nice and deep and see how that goes. So that'll be the next job. So I've just marked these with a pair of Jenny leg calipers. Set them sort of close by eye, and we can get that hole nice and on centre with the centre punch without too many problems at all, I reckon. So we'll centre punch that. I might get the drill press over here. It's dark over there on the other bench. If we clean all this stuff off and put the drill press here to do this job, I'm going to drill right down fairly close to the bottom here, and reasonably square, I hope, and put maybe a 3/16 hole all the way through, and then I might find a bit of 8mm brass and we'll drill it out to match that. So here we are with the drill press set up. Check this with a square and get it nice. Take the time to get it right. And same this way. What I found is that if this bolt at the back that tightens it up isn't quite tight, then it hangs down a bit at the front, and that's out. So I'm going to tighten that up, and I've set it nice and square this way. Forget about the little scale on the back, because it doesn't mean anything really. And I've set this up in this vise. Now this is a flash vise, really. It's a grinding vise or a toolmaker's vise. It's pretty good. They're not expensive, but it is pretty accurate, and I think you should use the best tools that you've got. I'm not just doing this with a blunt hacksaw and 2 blunt files and a G-clamp and a block of wood because of the challenge. I'm doing this to make an engine that runs. So I'm using the best tools that I've got, and this vise is included in that. We're going to swing this down a bit, and remember to tighten it up again afterwards. we've marked this in the centre here, which was fairly straightforward. And that looks pretty good. We want it to go down to about, I reckon, down to there. So I've set the stop to that. Probably could go a fraction more, I think. The pilot drill. We might do that. And let's drill him and see what we end up with. This is a bit noisy, this drill press, and some of you have commented on it before. Clear all those sharp chips off. They're a bit dangerous. Drilling in a bit at a time. It's a fair way to go, and it's a fairly deep hole. And something will get hot if we don't take precautions there. Still a little way to go. And we're right through. And take this drill out. And I'm just going to open him up a bit at a time. That one was about 5mm. What I found here is a bit of what looks to be 375 or 3/8. I'm going to use that. I don't think it's too big. And probably I'm going to make the piston and the conrod all in one bit. We'll see about that, because it'd be nice to have it adjustable too to get it running, I think. But at this stage, that's probably what I'm going to do, is just drill this 3/8 to match. We'll take this out in steps. It's probably a really good idea to remember to reset your depth stop every time you change the drill, because they're all different lengths. What we've got is a fairly stubby drill, so this actually disappears down inside the job, and there's nowhere for the chips to get out, so just be a bit mindful of that and pull him out a bit more often, if that's all you've got. Probably don't need to take very much out at a time, so I'm just going to go up a little bit at a time. So that was probably a bit foolhardy, but I've drilled that out to 3/8. Managed to find a drill that cuts nice. The drill press seems a bit scary if you're not used to it, and all these chips going everywhere. If you keep your hand below the drill and break the chip before it gets dangerous, you won't have an issue. But hang on, don't let go. That's the secret. Even if you're a little bit worried about it, don't let go. Anyway, we've got that hole in there, and I'm pretty pleased about that. And it's probably a pretty nice hole. Now, my bit of brass rod's probably got a burr on it, and I'm going to get a file and just take that off the end first before I even put it near the bore. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with scratches down it because it's only aluminium. And I reckon with a bit of oil on that, we've got a pretty good fit, and I'm really happy with that. I reckon that'll run nicely. So that's that. Next job is to put a pivot hole in here, and I'm not going to put the port in here until we get stuff sorted out. So we probably want to mark the centre of it and drill it and tap it before we put the drill press away or clean up. What you're going to find is that this hole is super critical to be parallel that way. So if we're fairly pleased with the way the drill press is set up and nothing's moved, if we sit that nice and flush there, hopefully if the table's clean and there's nothing under it that does that, we should be able to drill a nice neat hole. Now, we don't want to drill it right through unless we could possibly got to. If it does go through, the best way to do it is to put a stud and a nut on it so that you can Loctite it in and it's airtight. And probably you're going to find that it is going to pop through, and that's the easiest way to do it. We might find a piece of stud, even if you put a bolt in it and put a lock nut on it before you assemble it to tension the spring. But the easiest way is just to find a longer bolt and chop the end of it off. Anyway, that's the nice side. Let's blue that up again. Now your Jenny leg calipers should still be set if you didn't chuck them back in the cupboard and bump them. And I reckon that's probably close enough. We centre punch that in between there nicely and set him up, and we're going to drill him and have a look at how we're going to tap him so he's nice and square. So first thing I guess is to sweep some of this stuff up. So we've got this all nice and clean so there's nothing stuck underneath it. We're going to sit this in here. Now to be honest, it's quite a bit of fiddle to drill this just down so it doesn't quite break through and then tap a blind hole, especially in aluminium and not very big. Not that impressed with having to do that, so I'm just going to drill this right through. But so I don't mark the other side of the bore, what I'm going to do is set the stop again. Now the screw that I had was 4mm. I'm just going to have another look at that. I've got quite a lot of screws that'd probably be plenty good enough, but that's heaps of thread there to put a lock nut and a screw on. What we're going to do is chop that off and make a stud and Loctite that in there nice and firm and square, and then put a nut on the outside to assemble it so that there's no steam leaks or air leaks through the hole. This is 4mm, and an M4 tap is M4 by 0.7. So M4 less 0.7, or 4mm less 0.7 will give you the tapping drill size, which is about 3.3. You can find a 3.3mm drill. be a bit careful there with your finger that that doesn't move, because if you haven't quite got these pieces parallel, your vise might not grip it true, and then one end will move before the other end moves, and you'll end up with a hole that's not quite square. So we just be careful of that. And we've got a hole right through. While we set up, we've got the tap. We'll put that in the drill chuck and we'll start him off. Probably easier if I take the belt off, because I'm probably not strong enough to turn the motor and everything. If we just turn the pulley on top there, in the chips, we can start that tap nicely. And nice and square. All we've got to do then is take it out of the tap, take it out of the chuck, like that, put the tap wrench on him, and finish him off. There we go. It doesn't need to be tapped right through. You want something to lock up against. That way you can get it tight. We'll slip this out of the vise and have a bit of a look. So that's what we've got. It's a little bit of a burr in there, and if we run that drill back through there, we'll probably take that out without too much trouble at all. There we are, we've done that. And that should be, have a look, should be nice and square. So anyway, I just discovered it's midnight, so I'm going to leave this be, and probably tomorrow we'll make a start on the stand, fit all the flywheel up, and see how we get on. So let's go to bed.